The choir sang a song about "In Thee is peace and safety," and it goes along with this piece where it says, "When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned." But I still have this literal idea of walking through the fire, and I want to know if any one of you have been ever done that thing where you walk over burning hot coals? You've done it? How was it? No problems. Okay, so the video was about this church in Greece where for 1,000 years they've been reenacting this experience that had happened where the church had burned down and they rescued the relics from the church. There was a Bible and a cross, and I think there were 3 relics that they had rescued. Anyway, the church gets together, they burn this big bonfire down, and there's a bed of coals, and then the people holding the relics basically walk through the fire, the coals. And are you familiar with that Mythbusters show, that television show? Some of you are familiar with that show. These 2 scientists look at different things that are scientific, and they see whether it's real or not, and they do crazy things. One of them said, I'm going to walk through fire. I know scientifically it can be done, and so we're going to do that. And the problem was, when I saw the fire that they had built, it looked different than the fire that the other people had walked through in some of the other videos. And so he was basically running through it, and when he got to the end, he was hopping, and because he was really burnt. And then it showed pictures of his feet that had blisters. And he said, I did it wrong. So there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. Is that true? Yes. You have to walk softly with clear intention and not slowly. And so I had this literal idea of walking. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned. You can take it literally like that. But I suspect that the poet was talking metaphorically, symbolically, that when you walk through the fires of life, you will not be burned. Does that make sense? So, this is from a counseling perspective. There are 2 kinds of crises or fires that we are going to walk through. One is developmental crises that you are going to have to go through. Those can be things like birth. That's going to be a developmental crisis. Toilet training. That is a developmental crisis. Going to school the first time. Making a new friend. Adolescence is a developmental crisis or a fire that you have to walk through. Getting your first job. Getting married. Getting pregnant, middle-age crises, menopause, losing your parent to death, losing a spouse to death, your own death. All those are developmental crises. And everybody goes through more or less most of those things. We all had to go through toilet training, or at least most of us had to do that. So those are one type of crises. The other type of crises are accidental crises, or accidental fires, if you want to put that symbolically. So the accidental ones might be a surgery that you might have had to have. Might have been an accident that you might have had in a car. Might have been some kind of disability that you are struggling with. So it happens on a given choice. A war might be an accidental kind of a thing. Those kind of things. So you got the developmental crises that we all go through, and you got the accidental ones that some of us will go through. Like, I'm not going to be pregnant, Karina, but you are going to do that. And so for me, that would be accidental. For you, it's a developmental thing. I just want to make sure that we've got that straight. So for different people, we're going to have different crises. I got a phone call this week. It was on Friday, actually. And there was a young man who called, and he sounded like a young man on the phone. And he said, would you come to visit my mom? I think she's dying. She's talking about going to visit her husband, my dad, who died 7 years ago. And so I said, yeah, I can do that. The young man was not a member of this church or any other church, but the mom was a member of the church, but the pastor happened to be gone. And so I said, I'll come down and do that on Friday afternoon. So I drove down to Sandy, and I went into the assisted living facility, and I found the room, and there was the young man, and he had 3 children with him. The young man, he was so interesting to me because he looked like he had just come off the ski lift. I mean, he looked like he had the world by the tail. You know, he was, I would call it bopping around there. But, I mean, but somehow he had this idea that his mom needed somebody religious to go talk to her. And so I went in, and I didn't know what to expect. I had just got done visiting someone, Jean Clark, who looked like she was going to die. In fact, she died the next day. And so I know from past experience who looks like they have very short time in life and who looks like they might be going on for a while. So I went in to the room, and there were 2 or 3 other people, and then the young man was there, and then he stood outside the door. And I introduced myself. I'm Reverend Butler, and the lady who was lying in bed, she looked up at me and she smiled, and then we proceeded to have a 15-minute conversation on football, what she was going to eat, the different things in life that were just natural. And I thought to myself as I was talking to this lady's not going to die for months, maybe years. She's in good health. I'll probably die before her. But the young man who had not heard his mom talk about going to visit her dad, his dad, he believed that this was a crisis and a fire that he was walking through, and he wanted somebody to be with his mom at that point. So, what I'm saying is, sometimes the fires that we think are real fires, somebody else will think, been through it, not a fire. You're going to make it. Toilet training, I know it's a problem, but you're going to make it. Pregnancy, I think you're going to make it. For some people, that fire is all-consuming. It's all-consuming. Can't make it through. I don't know how you're going to make it through. Now, here's the way. You read that Bible, and then it says, I will be with you through the waters, through the flood, through the fire, right? So God's going to be with you. How does that happen? How is God with you in those fires? That's what I want us to think about today, okay? How is God with you through the fires? Now, 2 ways to think about God. God can come in during those fires of life and relieve you miraculously. God somehow comes down, intervenes into the world, and takes care of whatever problem that you might be going through. God does it. That may happen for some people. I am thrilled when that happens for some people. Here's what I have to say to you. You who have gone through developmental crises, you who have gone through accidental fires in your life, maybe a miracle didn't happen. How did you get through it? Here's what I'm going to suggest you did, just like what I did as I go through these different things. There is something inside of us that helps us to get through these different things. Losing a parent. You never lost a parent before, but you go through it and you think, how am I going to get through this? And somehow you call upon the reserves in you and say, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it one step at a time. I will grieve deeply. I will miss them horribly. But I'm going to call on the reserves that I have built in my life. Here's a second way that you might do it. You might think to yourself, I don't know how I'm going to get through this particular episode in my life. I need help. I need some help from somebody. Does somebody have a word for me? And if you are humble enough, will go out and find somebody who has gone through toilet training and say, "What? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Would you help me?" Somebody who has gone to their first job and they're in over their head, and you, if you're humble enough, you will go to them and will say, "How do I get through it?" Now, here's the kicker. Here's what I want to say to you. Of course, there are times when some kind of a miracle happens to get you through something that happens in your life. But most of the times, to get through these episodes in our lives, to get through the fires in our lives, we have to call upon the resources that are within us and that come from outside of us that are really look like natural things. Natural in our lives. I'm going to suggest that pattern of both the strength inside of us and those resources from outside of us, you don't have to go along with me, but I'm going to call those for myself a part of God working in the world. You don't have to go along with that. I'm okay with that. But when I read a piece of scripture that says, "You will walk through the fire and not be burned," somehow I know that we have all walked through different fires in our lives, and miracles didn't happen, but we made it through. And so somehow, for me and my faith, I have to figure out, how did I make it through? How did I make it through? And can I call all of those different resources, both within me and outside of me, God? That's something to think about. You might want to have a luncheon conversation about that. Would you do that? Would you do that? When you come to church, so often we get this message, I think. At least I've heard it and I've probably given it. Things are going to be okay. Things are going to be just fine. You look at the Washington, D.C., and this Supreme Court justice being approved. And there are people, I suspect, on both sides of the House in this place. And I think to myself, how does our faith, our religion, help us to get through something when we get so angry? And I have this cup right by my computer monitor. I don't read it very often. It just says this: keep calm and golf on. It's kind of a religious thing. But I think that humor piece tells me something about how to make it through. You take a breath. You keep going. You wake up in the morning, you make a cup of coffee, you think about yesterday, you keep going. You call a friend, you say, "This is what I'm dealing with," and you keep going. And somehow we make it through the fires. Something to think about. Amen.
Let us